Greetings and salutations, my history-loving mischief. Brian Guthrie, aka Guthron the Balding Bard, back with you again after an extended holiday. New year, new classes, new discussion topics. Today's suggested topic is to make a case for why the concept of Western civilization is relevant today. Western civilization. First, I'm not going to waste your time defining the concept. If you found this video, you're more than adept at research. Look it up. I will, however, do a bit of the work for you. What is Western civilization? It's not a geographic region. It's not a culture. It's not one distinct civilization. At this point, it's mostly just an idea, an ideal. People talk about it a lot, particularly using trigger words akin to demise, destruction of, loss of, or attack on. The thing about all of those descriptors, they require an other, that's with quotation marks, someone to do the destroying and attacking, causing the loss or demise. And when you do your own research, you're going to find that the concept of another, of there's an us and there's a them, is pretty much the origin of the concept Western civilization. No matter how you study it, where you started in history, who you attribute it to, or who uses it as time goes by, it is always a construct defining an us as opposed to a them. Some examples include the Greek versus the Persians, the Romans versus the Greeks, the Western Roman Empire versus the Eastern Roman Empire, the Western Catholic Church versus the Eastern Orthodox Church. In fact, you'll find that a lot of these us concepts define themselves as the better side versus the other barbarian side. That's pretty much how Greece saw everyone not Greek, after all. You'll also find that a lot of the us constructs get the strong male personification in history, including the 21st century workout abs and the glistening skin, looking right at you, Frank Miller and Zack Snyder, versus the effeminate, emasculated them, again, Frank Miller and Zack Snyder. Also, thanks Cogito for the image. Anyway, the male versus female struggle writ large in history, right? But the men were doing all the writing, so naturally they were the right side. Also, do not forget that connection to the Christian church. You can blame much of history and the evils of Western civilization on the church. Indeed, you could make an argument for the church being the primary catalyst in the creation of the construct. However, I digress. That concept of Western civilization hinging on an us versus them struggle never died. Indeed, it remains strong still today. I could roll out a queue of news clips using all of those trigger words from before that you will find all over the news channels. The us of Western civilization may shift in whom is included. Seriously, look at a map of Western countries and try not to get confused, as has the them, with some recurring motifs like barbarians, infidels, Muslims, Easterners, etc. But the one thing that remains a key component of Western civilization is there's us and then there's them. Oh, and we are better than them. Don't forget that part. It's crucial to studying history, particularly historiography. But wait, cry the professors and the defenders of Western civilization. You're just picking on us. We're not the only bad ones. Convenient how suddenly I'm the them because I made them an us. But did I? Or did they force me into that comparison by existing? Who truly is the us and who the them? It doesn't matter because it's all a construct. Civilization itself, while it has some similar components and identifiers, is purely a construct of history. The Indus River, or Nile, or Danube, or Amazon, or Mississippi, or Yellow, civilizations did not call themselves that. History did when looking back trying to create a narrative that almost always had two key elements, us versus them and good versus evil. But the concept of civilization does exist separate from a narrative. What makes up a civilization depends on who is doing the defining, and I'll leave you to do that research on your own. Suffice it to say, there is some agreement on what makes up a civilization. Those ideas are pretty universal. They aren't unique to one civilization. And here's the thing, if you ask a bunch of random people to give you a few words defining what Western civilization is, they'll eventually give you a list that looks something like this. Also, thanks Mr. Beat for the list. It's a pretty inclusive list. Also, it's one filled with common ideas. Common meaning not unique to one people or civilization. Now, as Mr. Beat states, some might disagree with morality comes from a higher power and capitalism being on the list of universally accepted, but beyond those, most people can support these ideas. For one civilization to lay claim to them as a unique aspect to their civilization is the height of hubris. History, when studied carefully and correctly, reveals that most of these concepts are universal in some way, shape, or form. We may not all agree on the execution of them, and some civilizations may have left some or most of them out, but they are pretty universally accepted among enlightened people groups. Enlightened, another co-opted term by Western civilization. Were they the only one to have an age where thinkers got to think and affect change? challenge Confucius, anyone? Co-opting things and making them their own was pretty much standard operating procedure for what most people define as Western civilization. You know, those pesky people groups that all came from Europe and set out bent on world domination via military, economic, philosophic, and religious means? You know, white civilization? When you break it down, really, Western civilization is the study of white European civilization. White Christian Europeans. And maybe that's how the concept of Western civilization as a course of study remains relevant today. No, not just a course to study white Christian European history. We have more than enough of that. As a reminder instead to everyone, especially white Christian Europeans, of what happens when you stand astride the highway of history and claim it as your own. Hubris and all that falling stuff. After all, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it, right? Wait, wasn't it a man, albeit an atheist in worldview, of white Christian European descent who coined the phrase? The irony is both hilarious and sad. That's it for this week's discussion. My class load requires less of these topical discussions, but I'll still find time to make them. I'll even have some new stuff to introduce to the channel over the coming months. Till next time.